Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome to Modern Leadership, the podcast where each week we sit down with authors, entrepreneurs, and leaders to explore their journey, diving into the ups, their downs, and ultimately the lessons they learned along the way. Our goal, of course, is to show that everything is figure-outable. Today's guest expert is Rich Allen. Rich is a nationally renowned speaker whose primary mission and focus and purpose is one single objective: helping business owners engage and activate the power of their team. He is the author of The Ultimate Business Tune-Up, a simple yet powerful business model that will transform the lives of small business owners. During his 30 plus years in the industry, he has gathered knowledge and expertise that allow him to inform business leaders on how to energize their teams, transform their businesses into one that is profitable, sustainable, and driven by radically engaged team members in a way that's as easy as riding a bike. Rich, it's so great to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Jake. Glad to be here.
And I can't wait to jump into this metaphor of the bike and the tune-up. But before we do, Rich, give us a little background of who you are and how you came to be on this podcast.
You know, I'm honored to be on your podcast, Jake. It's awesome. I've listened to several, and you have fantastic guests on. So I'm just honored to be here.
Hey, I'm glad to put your name right up there with any other name you've ever heard me talk to.
Well, thanks for that. No, listen, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And I say that because, most people don't think many people come from Cleveland. There are a few of us that have made it, that we've escaped.
I see them out here, Rich, in the winter. They come down here and visit in Arizona.
Yeah, I know. That's why I went there to school, right? I found my way to ASU. But I grew up in Ohio, and I grew up in a very, very large family. I had 11 brothers and sisters. My dad worked his tail off, was the hardest working guy I ever knew, worked 3 jobs when I was growing up. At age 34, he made the toughest decision of his life, and that was to quit his regular jobs and start his own business. And he made this bold move to start his own window washing business because at the time, he had this dream. He wanted to build a business and leave a legacy for his 12 kids. And Jake, my dad was probably the best window washer you could find, but my dad had no clue how to run a business.
Which is not uncommon, to have somebody that's very good at their trade, their craft, their service, their industry, but not really know how to turn that into a business or run it as a business.
And that was exactly where he was. And to him, the only way to make it better was to work harder.
Yeah, get up earlier, stay out later, or come in 7 days a week.
Exactly. And so that's what he did. And as a result, he missed everything that went on with his family, never came to any of the kids' activities. His relationship with our mom, his wife, grew bad, and they ultimately ended up in divorce. My dad ended up struggling his entire life and never could figure it out, but always thought that the answer was just work harder.
And as he was working harder, Rich, did he end up with a little bit of financial success? I mean, was he able to make what the world would call a successful business?
No. And that's the tragedy of it, Jake. My dad didn't. And all of us that work for him, our kid, myself, my brothers, we all were the slave labor basically while we were going to school. And one at a time, we each said, you know what? We can do this on our own better, or we could make a better life somewhere else. One of my brothers even left to go start his own window washing business, competing with my dad.
In the same location?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. How was that as a family dynamic? I bet Thanksgiving was interesting.
Yeah, it made Thanksgivings a little rough, but but the reality is, everybody knew that it wasn't going anywhere. And frankly, at the time, I didn't have a clue how to help. I didn't know what to do to help make it better. But it was what drove me to become a student of business and really dig in for the next 30 years of my life to try to figure out how a small business really works. And that's been my life's mission.
Well, and it's a great life mission. And we look at these 30 years and it's a never ending process, right? I mean, business is always changing. You're never going to know everything there is about business. So you continue on this path, but take us back 30 years ago. You have this light bulb. You maybe it's not a light bulb. Maybe it's just kind of a gradual realization that there is a better way. How do you start out? How did you find out the direction to go in this 30-year process?
For me, and again, at the time, I was just leaving high school, and honestly, we were so poor, there was no way I couldn't pay my way to go to college. So I had to do something that I never thought I would do, and frankly, I enlisted and went to go to into the military, so the military would pay for my college. And it wasn't a plan. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I knew that if I wanted to change where I was at, I had to make a bold move. And a lot of times in our life, we tend to get stuck simply because we're afraid to make bold decisions. And that was my first bold decision. It changed the trajectory of my life.
I think it's an interesting, bold decision. And I love what you're talking about here because I think as business owners, we don't need to necessarily know the exact path to take, but we need to start moving in a direction. And the door opened for you. You looked at it, you had a dream, you had a passion, you knew what you wanted to accomplish as far as learning this business. And the way that you could do that, the opportunity that presented itself was through enlisting. So, okay, this is a time period where you start to learn a lot about leadership. You start to learn a lot about how to lead other people. So tell us, how did you go from there to the next stage?
I ended up, Jake, I got my bachelor degree, did my time in the military. I learned a lot, loved it, didn't see myself as doing that as a career, and ended up leaving and going into a corporate role. So I did what most junior military officers do, and at the end of their time, they find a big company that likes the discipline that comes from a military service background. And I went to work for a company called Texas Instruments, a small electronics firm based here in Dallas. And I had a great opportunity to learn business in a large company from a high-tech firm. They were outstanding, but I wasn't an engineer, so they weren't going to let me run a business for them.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of roadblock that you face because you have what they needed to get to a certain level. And this I love. There's a book out there called Smart Cuts, How Hackers, Innovators, and Icons Shortcut Success. And one of the things that Shane Snow, the author, talks about is you lean your ladder up against a particular building. In this case, you went over to TI, you start climbing that ladder, and you realize that ladder is not going all the way to the top of the building. And what he talks about and what you're getting to is this idea that you got to shift the ladder to a new building. And so tell us what that shift was for you.
Yeah, so that shift was huge. I had been with TI for 15 years, thought I would end my career there, but I really desperately wanted to try my hand at running a business. I really wanted to know if I could do and learn what my dad hadn't figured out. And so when I got the definitive word that it wasn't going to happen, coincidentally, I was approached by the CEO of a company called Pella Corporation, a window company based out of Iowa. And he said, look, if you come join me, if it works, I'll let you run a business. And so I made the move. I moved my family to Iowa and took the gamble for the opportunity to one day run a business.
Yeah, and through that, you've learned an awful lot. And now I want to kind of fast forward a little bit and come to where we are today, Rich, because your website is called Tour de Profit, right? Like the Tour de France. And your book, Tune Up, and you talk about business and engaging your team as easy as riding a bike. So obviously there's this bike theme that's going through your life and through your business. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then let's dive into why bikes are the perfect metaphor for business.
Yeah, it was a powerful eye-opening experience for me, Jake. I had the opportunity to run a business, and honestly, on the first day that I was given the chance, we bought a small manufacturing firm, about a $30 million firm with about 200 employees, and I got a chance to go run it. And the first day I showed up, honestly, I was scared to death, and I didn't really know what to do.
And you're like 40 years old at the time?
I was about 40 at the time. maybe 37. And I walked around just asking questions, trying to get to know the people while all the time thinking, what in the world am I going to do? And then, Jake, where all great ideas hit you.
The shower.
All right. In the shower, I had this idea and I called my admin and I said, hey, call a meeting. I've got this. I know what we're going to do. And we cleared out a part of the factory, brought all 200 plus people in. I brought my bike in and put it up on a table at the front of the room. And when I got everyone's attention, I said, guys, what's this? And they all looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And some said it was a bike. A few guys in the back said it was stolen property. And I said, guys, this is our business. And if we could understand how our business is like this bike, we could tune up our business and make it go really fast. And so I kind of walked them through all the components of the bike and how each component relates to an aspect of business. And Jake, here was the magic. For the very first time, these factory workers understood how a business worked. And after the meeting, they all came up to me and said, I know what's wrong with our bike. And they started sharing what needed to be fixed. And they all started to get excited about making our bike, our business, better. So we had a 7-year journey. Fast forward 7 years, we were doing well over $100 million in revenue. We owned the top end of our product category. Our business was doing great, and our people were loving it.
Now, did you have a lot of turnover, or did that same 200 people that heard the original bike story, were they still part of the team 7 years later? For the most part, I know you're going to lose some here and there, but was that core group still together?
You know, the core group was pretty fundamental to the transformation because there were clearly some who didn't like the new direction, new enthusiasm. But for the most part, I'd say the vast majority thought this was what they were waiting for, some way for them to be engaged in the business. Because, Jake, here's what I see happen. A lot of people run businesses and the owner or the senior people in the business do all the thinking, and they want everybody else simply to do the labor. And I had a very different thought. My thought was they know far more about this business than I do. They're the ones that ought to come up with the ideas and introduce them into the business. And that's what we did.
And how did you have them introduce their ideas into the business? Did you hold like a box that they could put slips in? Did you have an open door policy? How did they communicate their ideas to top leadership?
No, we introduced this concept called Kaizen, which is rapid continuous improvement. It's a Japanese manufacturing concept. Toyota and other systems use it. But what it does is it basically you bring a group of people together, you give them a short period of time. We gave them 1 week to look at one area of the business, brainstorm some ideas on how they can make that area better, make those improvements, do it right then. And then on Friday, we would celebrate. And we did that every week, week after week, year after year. And so everybody was involved in thinking about new ways to do work, thinking about ways to improve the business. We'd celebrate every week. And as a result, they got pretty fired up.
And as you started out, obviously, as you started to grow and revenues started to increase and you start to win, in competition against your competitors and so on, top of your category, it's easy for the ownership of that company to look at you and say, Rich, you're doing amazing. But I imagine in the very beginning, here we have a 37-year-old coming into this manufacturing organization that probably had the average age of those you were working with. Some of them were probably quite a bit older than you. And I would imagine that some of the people who owned the parent company were looking down saying, all right, Rich, we're here looking at what you're doing. How did you get them to buy in and trust kind of this new style that you were going with?
It took some time, but when they could come every time they visited the factory, they could see quantitative change, right? We kept a lot of metrics. We kept a lot of data. We could see some things happening. I will tell you that, there was one defining moment, if I could share one story though, Jake, that was pretty powerful. I knew we needed to get everybody involved. And my passion is to get everybody kind of just on rowing in the same direction, right? Pedaling hard. And so I brought everybody together and I said, look, guys, here's 5 things we need to do, 5 targets we need to hit. And they were a customer service target, quality, productivity. You get the point. They were 5 critical things. And I said, the first time that we hit all of these targets on any given month, I will put all of your names into a hat and we will draw out one winner, and that winner will own my vehicle, own my car.
As in forever? That you
Forever.
Would give it to them?
Yes, I would give it to them.
Okay. That got their attention.
It did. And they started raising their hands and said, what kind of cars? I said, it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee, relatively new, couple of years old. They said, air conditioning? Yep, air conditioning. 4-wheel drive? Yeah, 4-wheel drive. AM, FM stereo? Yep, got it. And so anyway, I said, look, here's the deal. We do this, one of you will own my car. My wife thought I was nuts, but I knew that that was kind of talking to something that mattered to them. And I knew that would get them fired up about it. So sure enough, after the meeting, everybody's out on my car, checking it out, kicking the tires. For the next 5 months, every time I came to the factory, they'd say, how's my car? How's my car? And I said, look, I'm still driving it, but we're getting close, but I'm still driving it. After the 5th month, we hit all 5 targets. We rented out the surf ballroom, which was the last place Buddy Holly played before his plane crashed in Clear Lake, Iowa. We rented out the hall. I had my Jeep detailed. We put it onto the floor of the ballroom, had a big dinner with their families, brought everybody in, brought a big drum with everybody's name in it on stage, and we pulled out 20 finalists. Brought them all up on stage, offered any of them $200 if they wanted to bail out. One guy took the $200 because he said, I'll take the instant cash. But we ended up pulling out the final person was a 28-year veteran of the company that worked on third shift. And I signed over the title to the car that evening, and he drove it home.
Oh, my goodness. What company loyalty he had for you from then on.
Everybody, Jake, everybody was so proud of him for winning the car, for them for screwing the boss, if you will, right, taking advantage of the boss. And I got back up on stage and I said, guys, look, I got to ride home with my wife and she's not very happy with me right now. But I said, I know now you can do anything you put your mind to. And that's exactly what they did. And that's how the business really started to accelerate.
So I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, was your name in the drum? Was there a chance that you could win your own car back?
No.
Okay. The second question is this. How did you overcome, and by the way, tremendous story. I love it. And here, the reality is you guys hit those 5 numbers. The reality is that your bonus, your ability for income probably more than compensated you to be able to go out and get another car. And it's more the perception and the ability to really inspire the team that is amazing. Great story. But I want to ask you this. How do you keep the momentum alive when you've got so many people where there's a possibility that somebody's like, you know what? I don't think I'm the $200 guy. I don't think that we're going to get to this point. And so I'm going to slack off. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to be the one drawn anyway. And then you have this diversion within the company where you have a handful of people that are really pushing to win your car. And then maybe 1 or 2 or a handful of people that are saying, I don't care. I'm just picking up my paycheck.
No, that's a very good question. And here's how we did it. Because going hand in hand with this, we told them early on, guys, look, here's the deal. You're effectively owners of this company, even though you don't take the risk if things go wrong, and you don't have to carry any of the liability. But you get, I think the number was 20% of all profits go into a pool that gets shared by the team. So we had a profit sharing program where we said 20 cents out of every dollar of profit we made, we set aside and we divided it amongst the people that were in there. And we shared with them the data every month on how we did financially, and they could watch their paycheck grow. And we got to the point where at the end of the year, they essentially got an extra month's pay because of the profit that we made in the business.
Wow, that's remarkable. Now, would you say that same idea would work in a service-based industry? Let's talk about dental offices or law firms or small medical shops like physician offices. Would something like that work?
Absolutely. In fact, I spend most of my time these days as I coach small business owners, helping them craft and build profit sharing programs of some kind. It doesn't always have to be the same model, but some way to get everybody in the business realizing that when the business wins, they win. And that's frankly missing from a lot of small businesses. But it doesn't need to be. It's not that complicated, and it's not that, it honestly, what you want to do is you want to be able to, as a business owner, you want 85% of a big number rather than 100% of a small number.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I often say that to the clients that I coach with is, as we expand the pie, a smaller slice of a big pie is still a lot of income for you. Let me ask you this about this shifting mentality. We hear a lot about these millennials, and we hear that they're not as motivated by money as maybe some generations in the past. And does this type of profit sharing work with this millennial group, or do you tweak it a little bit and offer them different types of incentives?
There is some tweaking that probably is necessary, but Jake, here's what I've found to be really powerful. When a company, when a business owner combines a profit sharing pool with a defined set aside for mission work or doing good in the community. So if they say, look, we're going to put 15% of our profits into profit sharing, and we're going to put 10% of our profits or 15 into this mission or into charity work, I find that many millennials really dig that. And they really get fired up by that. So they get excited about building that pool of money that goes to local charities. That matters to them more than getting it in their paycheck.
Yeah, and I can see this a lot. We see a lot of companies now with this like 2% or, the 2% club that gives 2% of their profits to charity and so on, the 20% club and things like that. I love this idea of really aligning your vision, your mission as an organization with those of your team members. How about if you're dealing with multiple generations and you can't basically, have everybody get their way, right? I mean, you got to kind of work one system. Otherwise, it gets too complex to try to figure it out for each generation.
Yeah. I think the trick there, Jake, is that the business owner owns the business. They get to pick what they're most passionate about. And then what will happen is they will begin to attract people who have a similar bent or a similar interest. And sometimes it requires, or it ends up being a shift in the team makeup. But what I find is if a business owner can express their passion and they put their profitability of their company into the passion that they declare, they'll find people who really resonate with that and want to be a part of it.
I 100% agree with you. In fact, that's kind of the answer. Before I asked the question, that was the answer of, hey, Jake, how would you answer this question? I would say exactly the same thing. As the business owner, as you lead from a position of this is what's important to me, you'll attract like-minded people to you, and therefore you will have this consistent mission. It's when you personally as the business owner or as the leader don't have a specific vision, or it's not clear, or you haven't communicated it to your team, that complexities happen. And so I really love this topic. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is the difficulty of starting this type of profit sharing idea out when you're a brand new business owner. So when I'm a brand new business owner, maybe it's just myself and one or two or three employees. And honestly, I've taken on so much risk as a business owner that it's now time for me to start getting a return on that risk that I invested my risk tolerance, and my return on that is some of the profits that are coming in. And what do you say to a brand new business owner that's basically looking at their wallet and there's a lot of lint in there and saying, let's talk about putting some money aside for your team?
Here's what I would say to them, Jake, and I would say it unquestionably. The first thing they need to do, and this ought to be something for every new business owner, they ought to go get the book Profit First.
Mike Michalowicz, been a guest on this show.
Yep, Mike is fantastic. He gets it. He knows it. His methodology is rock solid. I have all of my clients apply the principles and begin profit in your company from day one and start sharing profit from the beginning Don't wait till you get a pool of profit before you now want to engage your team. They'll help you get there faster. And everybody that I talk to, they say, well, I'd love to do a profit sharing program, but I'm not profitable right now. Okay, then let's start the program now. Tell everybody we're not profitable now. And guess what? They'll help you get profitable quickly.
Yeah, I love this. And I'm a huge fan of Profit First. I run it with all of my businesses. And I'm actually going out next week to see him speak because I love what he's doing. And like I said, he's been a guest on this show in the past. So wonderful. Now, the last question before we jump to our final section that I've been dying to know, and that is, how often do you make these profit distributions, or do you recommend it? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it annually?
No, my recommendation is I want to get people thinking more long term. And so I don't want them thinking quarterly. I don't want them thinking monthly. As a minimum, I would say it's twice a year. And because in most cases, what I like to do, what I recommend people do, is that they align it with their performance assessment process as well. And many will say, geez, I don't do that. Well, it's a good reason to do it. Because now if you align profit sharing with performance assessment, and you do that a couple of times a year where you're giving feedback to your team on how well they're doing, and by the way, if they do it well, they may share a little bit more in the profits. I promise you, they will come alive.
Well, and it also helps for tenure, right? For keeping people on the team, for employee retention, when, if you're paying on a monthly basis versus someone has a bigger objective looking forward to in 6 months that they're really looking to.
Right. You got to be here to win.
You got to be here to win. And I believe, Rich, that we as humans are kind of conditioned to have these natural cutoff points. Like when we read a book, we read until we get to the next chapter, then we put the bookmark in and go to sleep. Or when we're watching, a television show, we'll sit there until the commercial comes and then we'll take a break to go do anything. And I think that these types of things within our business on a biannual basis or even an annual basis gives us a natural break for us to work towards an objective and then have an evaluation period and then start the process over again working to an objective.
Right. And by the way, celebrate no matter how you do. Celebrate, because we don't celebrate near often enough.
Well, Rich, I got to be honest with you. I started this podcast for the express intent of me sitting down and being coached by great leaders, authors, and entrepreneurs. And I feel like I have just personally sat through a great coaching session on things that I can do within my business to help motivate my team. So, Rich, I really appreciate that. Before we close, I want to jump to our final section, which is my favorite section of the podcast, and that is learning from leaders. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Shifting gears just slightly, what is the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table? What are you reading these days?
Right now, I just finished and I'm reading again the Bezos letters by Steve Anderson.
So these, I assume, are Jeff Bezos's letters to who? His executive team?
Steve basically analyzed the last 20 years of shareholder letters from Amazon, Jeff Bezos. And so he outlines in there the 14 growth principles that Amazon has used to be the fastest growing company on the planet. And it's fascinating.
How about your leadership superpower?
I loved your assessment, by the way. That was awesome. I really got into it. I came up as an inspirational leader.
And it doesn't surprise me because you just told us a story about you bringing your bike into the office and putting it up on display. You just told us a story about getting your car detailed and driving it into the ballroom and then getting a ride home with your wife. It doesn't surprise me that someone like you that would come on a podcast and be an author and would talk about these principles would come up as an inspirational leader. So I love hearing that. Our next question then is the quote, philosophy, or mantra that you live by.
I have one quote on my computer monitor. I don't even know who to attribute it to, so I can't give them credit. It's a short one. It just says, "Don't let dollars delay destiny." And I've applied that hundreds of times, where a lot of times we make decisions too slowly because we aren't quite ready. And I see people do that to add team members to their business. somebody needs some admin support, but they don't really have the dollars yet to do it. As soon as they get halfway there, they ought to do it because that person will allow them to free up time to go generate more revenue. Everything flows from not slowing down.
If we had more time, Rich, I would dive into some of my coaching principles. But one of the things I talk about is in your second stage of growth as a business, you need to leverage resources. That's how you expand growth. That's the gasoline that makes your fire ignite. And people is one of the great resources that you can leverage to grow your business. There's never going to be a little fairy that comes down and says, hey, today, Rich, is the day that you should hire somebody. No, sometimes you got to act in the darkness, knowing with confidence that you're building a business that can sustain it. I love that philosophy that you live by. Our final question then for you today is the book that you most often gift to friends, family, or colleagues.
Okay, I don't know if you've heard of this one, and it may not make many people happy, but the book is called The Road Less Stupid, and it's by Keith Cunningham. And if no one knows who Keith Cunningham is, if you've heard of Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Keith Cunningham is actually his rich dad. He's the guy, the advisor that helped Robert Kiyosaki in his financial wealth strategies. He's unbelievable. He's the smartest guy I've ever met, lives in Austin, Texas. And he wrote this book about the 30 or so stupid things that we get wrong in business, and he's just trying to help us avoid making stupid mistakes. Because the reality is, it's kind of the Warren Buffett thought, right? You don't make money by just going out and killing it. You make money by never losing it.
Yeah, and you have recommended 2 books that are not on my bookshelf and are now on the bookshelf. I have got to read both of them. Both sound fascinating.
You'll love it.
All right, my friend. Well, we have got to let you go today, but before we do, we would love to find out how we can learn more about you and, of course, pick up a copy of this great book.
Well, you can, Jake, we created a page on our website for your team, for your listeners. So you can just go to tourtoprofit.com. It's one word, TOURDEPROFIT.com. And if you put in /MLP, we put some resources on there, including where you can find the book, some other free resources. That's one good place. The other one I'll just mention quickly is if you're on Facebook and you're a business owner, I've got a private Facebook group for business owners only. It's called Join the Peloton. Join the Peloton, one word. It's where business owners are just talking about and dealing with challenging questions, and we're riding together. And when we ride together, we can go faster.
Well, wonderful, Rich. We are going to link all of these up on the show notes. We love when our guests have special offers for the audience, and we'll jump over there and take a look at those. We sure appreciate you coming on. You truly are this week's Modern Leadership guest expert.
Thanks, Jake. It's been a pleasure being on the show. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friends, are your hands tired from taking all those notes? Well, if you were in your car or on the treadmill or doing whatever as you listen to this podcast, don't worry. I took all the notes for you. Great stuff here. I sure appreciate Rich coming on and talking about this idea of engaging our team, of really building a process that's like a bike that everybody can understand, everybody can get behind, and can really help us grow our businesses. This is the question I get most often in my coaching. And so I appreciate Rich jumping on, sharing with us how he did it within his company and how you can do it within yours. Of course, everything that we talked about can be found on the show notes for this episode, jakeacarlson.com/ML158, episode 158. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, everything is figure-outable. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.